Before we begin my talk tonight, I want to apologize in advance to those of my audience whom this talk doesn't apply. The philosophy of mind, and specifically the study of physicalism, applies to only those human beings who are conscious and have a unique and individual mind. So for those of you who are neither conscious nor have unique and individual minds, I would apologize for hurting your feelings, but as feelings are an integral part of being conscious, I won't bother. For those of you who do have feelings and thoughts, dreams, emotions, I want to talk to you a little bit today about physicalism. Physicalism stems from the philosophy of mind. The philosophy of mind is the study of the mind and its relationship to the body. Creatively, philosophers call this the mind-body problem. What the mind-body problem is, in its essence, is how the mind, which you can think of as your personality, your desires, your wants, your needs, the thing that makes you individual and makes you you, interacts with our physical body, which is not unique but consists of the same substances as every other human that's out there. In order to solve the mind-body problem, three main solutions have come about through philosophers. The first one I'm going to talk to you today about is dualism. Dualism began back in the days of Plato and Aristotle. Plato decided that the intelligence, what we think of as our intellect, and our soul were not part of our physical body, but were somehow trapped within it. They were confined in our body, that they existed beyond ourselves once our body died. Philosophers at his time argued that this was improbable because if you had a non-physical intellect or soul, it couldn't be trapped within a physical body. So his pupil Aristotle refined his idea. Now, he claims that the mind, rather than the intellect, must exist and be immaterial or otherwise. No material or mind, or no simply as we know today to be our brain, could ever understand things that were not physical, such as mathematics. We know that perfect triangles exist. We have formulas for them. However, if the formulas, we also know that the formula describes something that does not exist, something that is immaterial. So how can we know something that is immaterial without having an immaterial mind? However, Aristotle ran into the same problem. How does something immaterial interact and give knowledge to the physical? How do we describe vocally or on paper a perfect triangle without with the influence of an immaterial mind, if the immaterial mind can't interact? So, René Descartes, you've probably heard of his name, though you may not be familiar with a lot of his work, refined the mind-body problem into what we know it to be today. He called the intellect to be physical. Physical in the sense that our knowledge consists of how our brain is wired. But he said that our consciousness, that things that makes us unique in the animal kingdom, our self-awareness, is something that exists outside of our body, that is more than just our physical mind. The problem with that is it really rational to think that our consciousness, which we're aware of, is inseparable or from our physical body and yet still remain? Let me explain further. Does it make sense that we can lose our memory of ourselves or who we are? We can have our brain damaged to the point that we no longer are conscious, even though our body still exists, and then say that our consciousness exists somewhere outside of that. If our brain can't recognize our consciousness, but our consciousness can't exist. But if our brain can recognize our consciousness, then it does exist. It sort of negates the need for consciousness at all. The second solution to the mind-body problem, as we go towards the more modern age, is monism, or non-physical monism, more specifically. The two different types of monism is first called idealism. Now, idealism is not the same as someone fighting for an ideal, but it's the same. It is a theory that the only thing that truly exists are minds. That everything physical that we know of, the chair you're sitting on, the car you drove to work today, those are all figments of our imagination. Now, of course, you can see that there are significant problems with this theory, considering if everything's a figment of our imagination, what's the bother of imagining anything at all? Another form of non-physical monism is neutral monism. Neutral monism is the idea that there is no consciousness, there is no interpretation of the way things are. Everything we see is separate from everything else. Every color we see is an individual thing, and our recognition of that color as being a color is an individual thing. And every instance of those individuals work together in some seamless process that grants us the illusion of consciousness. Now, personally, I don't like to be thought of as simply something that is conscious, sort of. So, I dismiss non-physical monism in favor of physicalism. There are some basic types of physicalism. The first physicalism is the non-reductionist physicalism. This means that everything that you think you know, what it means to be sad, what it means to be angry, all of those are just states of your brain. Brain states are what they're called. Just some collections of electrical impulses and arrangements of neurons that create your idea of emotion and your idea of anything else for that matter. The second one is emergentism, which is where two basic properties, say hydrogens and oxygen, mix to form a more complex property such as water. And even if you had perfect knowledge of both hydrogen and oxygen, you would never be able to predict the properties of water. Now, the problem with this theory is that if you had perfect knowledge of hydrogen and oxygen, that knowledge would include the result of interactions with other basic elements. So the only one that's left is eliminative physicalism. Eliminative physicalism explains the entire world and the idea that anything we know, our feelings, our knowledge, anything that has to do with our mind, our wants, our desires, will someday be able to be discerned by a neuroscientist as a specific set of actions within our brain. Now, which of these solutions to the mind-body problem are the most likely has been a debate for thousands of years. However, modern science has allowed us to make giant leaps toward which one is right. First off, the way we can argue about which one is right is to focus on the two things that we know most about our mind. One, our intellect, our knowledge, our ability to process information. And two, our personality, who we are. So, first one I want to talk about is our intellect. We know our ability to process information can be damaged by physical trauma, car accidents, gunshot wounds, anything that damages our mind can impede the process by which we interpret information, therefore lowering our intellect. And this isn't enough to support physicalism. There's another case, our personality. Our personality, you would think, would transcend our mind. However, in a very well-documented case, this is Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage had a spike. Accidentally, it exploded in his hand, drilled through his skull. He lived. It did not affect his intellect or his ability to process information. It did, however, affect who he was as a person. Those that knew him would say that there was a Phineas Gage that existed before the accident and a Phineas Gage that existed after the accident who was a completely different person. Now, a physical trauma can affect us in such a way to change our entire personality into we are a completely separate person. It is not inconsistent to think that our mind is directly linked to our physical body. So, of all the three solutions, the only one that is backed by evidence is that of physicalism. Physicalism says that our mind is a direct result of the physical makeup of our brain. Now, what type of physicalism you subscribe to, which one is correct, has yet to be decided, but these are the first major steps. It is time to discard dualism, the idea that the mind and the body are separate. Instead, we need to recognize that our mind is a direct result of our physical makeup. Through that, we can move on. Thank you.